I want to bring in here Attorney Kate Hartley joins us. She has been a good friend of the show here. She was also our only live guest so far that we've had on the show. Actually, I take that back. When we went to Boise, we had I had Brian Ullman live, but you were by far the best of the bunch so far. So, welcome, Ms. Hartley. I wanted to go through a lot of the updates here on some of these bills having to do with the First Amendment, because a lot of them aren't getting passed. In fact, some of the ones that I sent you that I wanted to kind of cover are just lingering and not being addressed. So it makes me wonder, is Idaho a First Amendment state? Do we love the First Amendment here or not? And so I wanted to get your take on some of this. What has been your overall sort of reaction to everything going on, specifically with the First Amendment issue here in Idaho so far?
Thanks for having me again, Matt. It's very disappointing to see some of what I would consider, I think most people in Idaho would consider no-brainers as far as bills that would protect our individual rights or allow us to celebrate our own viewpoints in a non-offensive manner. It has been disappointing to see so much pushback against them, really from a number of different angles, and like you said, it's just dying in certain committees. And obviously I'm not a politician to know all the background on that, but it is certainly disappointing that it's taken that route and gives people like me, less tools to help protect Idaho citizens.
Yeah, and I think one of those tools is one of the arguments that we keep seeing repeated is that this will bankrupt an agency, or this will bankrupt the state, or it's too harsh of a penalty, and we can't have these penalties. But I always like to push back on that, because I don't think the penalties are harsh enough. Because if they were, then maybe people who work for the government wouldn't be restricting people's rights and violating their rights from the top all the way on down. I mean, in your experience, if you had to argue this, has a First Amendment violation ever bankrupted a government agency anywhere across this country? I don't know if you know every case, but I would think that would have made headlines.
Certainly not that I know of. And like you, this argument is very frustrating because, it's a slap in the face to individual rights. The government is already very well protected, right? They have a lot of funding, they have a lot of resources, they have a lot of employees. The individual who has potentially been aggrieved does not have resources like that. They don't have that protection. And so that is where the First Amendment or other state laws that mirror the First Amendment come into play to protect the individual from the government in certain situations like this. And yeah, to your point, in light of the amount of money the government, generally speaking, has, these cases are a drop in the bucket. And that's if they're won by the individual. But I think that the key thing that is frustrating is, and I want people to know this, the government is already very well protected, and these rights should be to protect individuals and not the government.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the key point right there. If I could take away anything, it's like these rights are here to protect the people, not the government. And there's plenty of people that keep getting elected that are sitting there wanting to defend the government. And I think next year, when a lot of these bills come back, because I'm sure some of them hopefully will, if these folks get reelected, is they need to push back on that argument that this is going to somehow bankrupt the library or the school or the government or whatever agency, and say, you know what, you can't use that argument anymore. Show me any time that has ever happened. And if you can't, then we got to move on. Okay, so let's get specific then. House Bill 517, which I believe is the one which gives standing to bring a case against the state within Idaho, so without going outside of Idaho and having to bring a case in federal court. Walk us through a little. I know we've had you on several times to talk about this, but we get new viewers all the time. Not everybody's watching every episode like you and I do. But walk us through a little bit of where this bill what you know of this bill, because it passed committee, it was on the floor, and then it got brought back into committee. And I know that you've been following this one very, very closely. You may have even been around when it was being drafted. What can you share about this bill and the status and what we think is we need to do here?
Yes. So in general, this bill would provide an Idaho statute that would allow for a civil action under the Idaho Constitution. So it would mirror what we already have in federal law. We have a federal statute that allows us to sue for a constitutional violation under the US Constitution, but we don't have an analogous statute like that in Idaho. And so this bill specifically doesn't target the entire state constitution. It only addresses the two different clauses for free speech and free exercise of religion, so that if an aggrieved citizen of Idaho who's undergone a free speech violation or a free exercise of religion violation would have a state law remedy under our Constitution. And our Constitution says that we have these rights, but really there's no remedy to pursue if these rights have been violated. So that's kind of the background on the bill. I think it would be a great thing, again, for individual rights for people in our state, and to have more options and more strategy potentially for someone who is going to file a lawsuit like this.
Yeah. And real quickly, when this was being debated in committee, Representative Joe Alfieri, I think we have a clip. Let's play that clip real quick of Representative Joe Alfieri talking about how this has affected real people, and this was one of your clients. So let's listen to Representative Alfieri.
Madam Chair, I think in discussing this, it's important to go back to the spark that ignited this fire here, and got Senator Taves going on this. This is a freedom of speech issue. We have freedom of speech by the U.S. Constitution. We have freedom of speech guaranteed under the Idaho Constitution. But under the Idaho Constitution, there's no redress to that. So here's the example. A young man in Kellogg said something, and he was barred from his high school ceremony, his graduation. And a gentleman showed up in protest of that, a gentleman who was employed by the school district, and he was fired from his job. And that young man was removed from the job that he had applied for and had been approved for as well. And there was no redress for them, except in federal court, which of course takes forever to get through. This addresses that problem. You need a mechanism. If there's a law and if there's a violation of the law, you need a mechanism for the person who's aggrieved to be made whole again. And that is what this does. Simple as that.
Yeah, it was simple as that, and you represented both of those examples, those folks in there. And I know one of those cases was settled, and the other is still pending. It's still ongoing.
Correct.
Yeah. And it's in federal court. So how long do you expect this to take?
A long time, potentially. It
Right.
can take a long time. And yeah, that was very well said by Joe Alfieri. There's a lot that goes into making strategic decisions about where and how to file a lawsuit, right? And so again, this would provide a tool for people to utilize the best court, depending on their specific situation and the specific facts of their case. And we don't have that, in this situation. And so that was very well said, I think, by Representative Alfieri. And again, we don't have the right if we don't have a remedy, right? And so these quote unquote rights that we have under the Idaho Constitution, do we actually have them if there's no remedy that flows from them? And so that's truly what this bill is about, and it would give just people better options, better strategy in filing lawsuits.
Yeah. Real quick, do other states have passed similar legislation like this, or have remedies in other states, you think?
In varying degrees, yes.
Okay.
So it's not like a completely new idea. Again, there are some states that have maybe not exactly like this. And again, this bill obviously targets only 2 areas of the Constitution. But yes, there are similar concepts in other states, even though they look different than this.
Right. Okay, great. All right. Well, I mean, like I said, I don't think they're gonna. I mean, this it was on the floor, then it got pulled back into committee, so maybe there's some rewriting that needs to be done. I mean, was there anything in the bill that you would change to make it more enticing, except removing penalties? We don't want to do that.
Exactly. I mean, the push, like you already mentioned, so much of the pushback was we need to protect the government. We need to protect the government, and we need to make these changes to protect the government. And I think some of the changes that were requested would be neutral, meaning it wouldn't destroy the bill or make the bill weaker. And so I think some of those changes would be reasonable changes to make. Obviously, that's the decision of the sponsors of it.
Okay.
And so, hopefully this or something similar to it will be attempted again next year. That would be certainly my hope. And make some of those, neutral changes, as I would call them, to still provide a remedy and hopefully make some other people happy as well.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess speaking of protecting the government, the other bill that seems to be stuck is House Bill 538, which is this compelled speech, which would protect government employees from being forced to, I've been saying, being forced to lie or speak against their conscience when they are being told that they need to use somebody's preferred pronoun or title or name or something that just that seems antithetical to science and grammar and all sorts of reasons why you wouldn't want to confuse people. This bill, it did pass the House, and it's now sitting in Senate State Affairs Committee, being ignored. We had thought that maybe perhaps it would have been brought forward, but they're focused on other things at the moment, which are completely ridiculous. Bring us up to speed on this bill and what it seeks to protect when it does come to people, government employees, teachers, staff, law enforcement, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, this is a great bill. We really like this bill, and we have seen the effects of what this bill is seeking to protect in our state and all over the country. And what it is saying is that a government entity cannot force a government employee to use preferred pronouns if that conflicts with the government employee's religious beliefs or moral beliefs. And this is something called compelled speech, where the government should not be able to force an individual to say something that they disagree with, that violates their faith, violates their conscience. And the basis for this bill is very well founded in solid U.S. Supreme Court case law. Compelled speech has been called demeaning by the Supreme Court, and it is very clearly established that the government cannot force speech. And so that's exactly what this bill addresses. I think it's a great bill. I can attest to the fact that this is a problem in our state and in our country, and it should be like many of these. This should be a no-brainer. But it is.
It really should be. I mean, if anybody studies literature or watches Star Trek, there's a great from Orwell from 1984. There was a great episode of Star Trek Next Generation where the captain was being forced to say that 2 + 2 = 5. Or maybe that was in 1984. But there was a correlation that I want to get to, which is the state was trying to tell you that you needed to believe in a lie. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't just that you were to say 2 + 2 = 5. You actually had to believe it. And all that, in my estimation, all that starts with something that this bill is trying to stop, which is no. You must say that person is a man, and And eventually it's going to be, no, you must believe that that person is a man. And then we're just down that road. And so the work, the work that you do is so important. And I don't want to keep putting all this burden on you, but what you're doing is so important. And what people need to do is back you, back your organization, back people who are fighting these, writing these bills, and really putting your foot down and electing good people and supporting good people, so we can get rid of this nonsense. Okay. So thank you. A couple of the other things, I really want to get to the traditional family. I want to end with that so we can go out on a high note here, because we don't need a bill just to do that. So we'll get to that in a second. But I do want to ask you about something, a bill that I know you may not know exactly what this bill was doing, but there was a bill that was going to ban the advertisement of, it would ban companies from advertising illegal activities or illegal products in the state of Idaho. So I think that the example would be a Washington-based, marijuana vendor couldn't put up a billboard on the other side of the border advertising their products because marijuana is not legal over here. So when it didn't pass, it got failed, and there was a lot of free speech discussion about it. But there was also, it seemed like it was targeting certain companies, and it was very confusing. And the way that I feel like the folks were saying that the way the bill was written, it could have enveloped a ton of other things. So all that aside, that bill specifically aside, the interesting question to me was, should companies or people be allowed to advertise illegal activity? Is that something that's protected under the First Amendment?
That's a good question. In general, no. Advertising illegal activity is not protected. Like you said, and I have not read the bill, so I cannot speak specifically to the language. But based on what you're saying, it could have language that is vague or overbroad, which could bring up First Amendment free speech concerns, that it would be prohibiting other speech that is protected. Again, this is conjecture, but that is a common issue, and that's why the drafting needs to be very careful with these types of things. But in a very general manner, that is not protected to advertise illegal activity. Right.
Okay. All right. Well, let's take a. Will you mind? We're going to take a short break, and then we'll come back. We'll talk about traditional family, and then we good. Are we okay with that? Great.
Yeah.
We'll be right back.